Alright, what happened to my desk?
I've always had a lot of respect for the Kirby series and loved Kirby as a character. I always knew him as one of the most iconic Nintendo characters with Mario and Link, but I never actually played a Kirby game, and especially not to the extent of a Mario game. I played a game or two on the 3DS, and I remember owning Kirby's Epic Yarn on the Wii. I love when the word epic is used in game titles. It's very 2010s. What I'm saying here is that while I have a connection to Kirby as a character, I really have no connection to his games, and the ones I have played, I don't know, it's this Kirby Planet Robobot, what am I supposed to say? So today I wanted to take a full-on look at the first few Kirby games to introduce me to the series in a more formal way. The Kirby series first started on the world's most iconic paperweight known as the original Game Boy. Now I have an appreciation for the original Game Boy, and I think it did a lot of things right and had many great games, but in the modern age, I would rather drink cow piss mixed with rat poison than play this thing for longer than 3 minutes.
Which is why I'm playing the entirety of the first Kirby game on here. Don't ask me what I'm into.
The first Kirby game released was Kirby's Dream Land for the original Game Boy. You know, as I said like 10 seconds ago, I hope you remember that, because if you didn't, I don't want to begin to think of the audience I've captivated. But with this being on the original Game Boy, you know what that means.
I'm gonna need to take copious amounts of drugs to get through this game.
One thing I always forget is that the original iteration of Kirby was depicted as being white rather than the iconic pink we see today. I guess this was just to make him fit better on the Game Boy since this thing had like a 2-inch screen with no color. I'm pretty sure he was always envisioned as pink, but for some reason on the box art he's still white, so there was probably some sort of miscommunication somewhere during development. In terms of gameplay, this game is a 2D platformer like many of Nintendo's other popular franchises, but Kirby's Dream Land sets itself apart from the rest by being slow as fuck. Kirby has no run button and moves significantly slower than a platformer like Mario, and this is because levels in Kirby are much more about exploration than platforming. Kirby also has the ability to suck up a lot of air and fly up, which adds to the exploration aspect of the gameplay. Speaking of sucking up a lot of air, inhaling is a better word, Kirby's main attack is to suck up enemies into his small spherical body, and he can either swallow them or spit them back out to attack other enemies in front of him. Awesome, he's just like me. In future Kirby games, this sucking ability, I didn't even realize I wrote that. In future Kirby games, this sucking ability was expanded upon so you can swallow and copy the designated enemy's powers, which really helps with choosing how you want to play the game, but that's kind of irrelevant now. We're playing this on a calculator. The story of this game is pretty simple and does a good job at setting up the characters. You see, King Dedede, this obese penguin, has stolen all the food in Dreamland, along with these magic stars that can create more food. Wait till he learns what a chef is. But Kirby, being his fat-ass self, decides to rescue all his food and defeat King Dedede once and for all, until like a year later when the next game releases, but irrelevant. This game has 5 levels you must traverse, followed by a boss at the end, and once completed you can fight King Dedede, which may sound like this game, but these are actually pretty long levels with branching paths and things to find, so you can't have that big of an issue with it. Also, this is a Game Boy game. Do you want a 40-hour adventure? Yeah, I brought my Switch on the bus and tried to complete Breath of the Wild in that time. I missed a few stops. The bosses in this game are actually really fun and creative, like this big tree that blows air at you, like an opposite to Kirby's main ability, as well as this big blimp guy, which I just think looks funny. At the end of the game, you need to refight all the bosses in order to fight King Dedede, like at the end of a Mega Man game or something. And then you must fight King Dedede, duh, and it takes like 3 minutes, and then boom, the game is done. That's it. That's it? You can beat this game in like 20 minutes, it's a really short game. I always tend to forget that many Game Boy games are incredibly short, I assume for memory reasons and also because it's a handheld game with no saving. You can't expect a little kid to beat a 40-hour game in one sitting. Me, on the other hand, I'm not built like other kids. I had a really hard time socializing when I was little. Overall, I find the first ever Kirby game to be a very interesting piece in Nintendo history, as no one ever really talks about this game, especially compared to many of the other Kirby games. I enjoyed my time with this game, but I wouldn't go back to replay it every once in a while like I do with the original Super Mario Bros. Or something. My plan with this game is to keep it in my memories and forget about it for the most part, unless I need to arouse a female with my vast amount of Nintendo knowledge. So I'll forget about the game completely. Anyway, on to the next game. When I was younger, I had always assumed that this was the very first Kirby game. Considering that franchises like Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and many others got their start on the NES, it just made sense in my tiny, thick skull that Kirby fit into the pattern. I remember having this game on Wii Virtual Console and feeling like I was experiencing a piece of history, like how I felt when I was playing Super Mario Bros. Or something on Virtual Console. But Little Coil was wrong and stupid, and I can't believe I was so uneducated on my Nintendo facts that I'd get such a simple fact wrong. God, I was so stupid. What happened to me? Breakdown aside, Kirby's Adventure is Kirby's grand entrance to console games, no longer stuck on the underpowered and unusable brick. This means that this game can be much longer and much more in-depth than a simple Game Boy game, which, yeah, it is, but also just kind of more the same. Now don't get me wrong, I enjoyed my time with this game a lot, and definitely a lot more than Dreamland, but I don't feel like this game is able to really set itself apart from the previous entry besides being in color. Okay, maybe that is enough. This game, like Kirby's Dream Land, is a 2D platformer with the same gameplay as that game with jumping, flying, and sucking. I hate that goddamn word. This, however, is the first game to introduce Kirby's most iconic ability, the power to absorb the abilities of whichever enemy he swallows. Damn, it took us this long? I've always loved this ability, and it allows Kirby games to stand apart from really any other platformer at the time, as it allows the gameplay to switch up seamlessly without being an annoyance to the player. It also allows you to pick whichever moves suit how you want to play the game. I'm just saying it's a really good ability. I don't need to do all this. My only issue with this ability's inclusion in this game is that it does lack the depth that the copy abilities have in future Kirby games. Wait until I learn about the evolution of hardware. This can make the copy abilities in this game feel like a one-trick pony and make them feel stale after prolonged use, but I'm in no way saying that these are a bad inclusion or I would rather go without them. Plus, yeah, the original NES controller has like 2 1/3 buttons, so I don't know how you can make using a copy ability in multiple ways feel natural using this thing. You see, this button's for religion and washing the sins away after you get done playing Poker Kid, and these buttons are for doing other stuff I don't remember. So yeah, this controller does not leave much room for anything else. This game has 7 worlds in total with a few levels in each, and each world has a different theme ranging from beach to forest and space and other stuff. I really like that each world feels varied compared to one another because in Kirby's Dream Land, each level, while having different things, all kind of feel the same and blur together. But then when playing Kirby's Adventure on the NES, and holy smokes, is that the color red? It shouldn't be that impressive. The levels in this game feel roughly the same as in Kirby's Dream Land, but are significantly longer and have a lot more things to find and collect, which is cool. And the bosses also feel pretty much the same as in Kirby's Dream Land, just with some more depth, blah blah blah. Kirby's Adventure is a great sequel that does more than a passable job at being, you know, a sequel to Kirby's Dream Land, and expanding upon the mechanics and ideas originally brought by that game. And while yes, the game doesn't age the greatest in many aspects, it's still a fun game to play around with for 30 minutes or so, until you get bored because your dopamine receptors just aren't the same after the incident. Okay, so you remember how I was talking about Kirby's Adventure and how it was a sequel to Kirby's Dream Land? Never mind all that. That's cause in 1995 they slapped a number 2 to the original game and oh boy. By this time Kirby was one of Nintendo's biggest franchises as it had so much appeal, especially towards younger players that a game like Zelda may not give them. Kirby's Dream Land 2 does more or less the same thing as the first 2 Kirby games, having the same gameplay and general level design. This game does adopt the copy abilities from Kirby's Adventure, but with the Game Boy having limited capabilities compared to the NES and the lack of color to differentiate Kirby's look for each ability, they had to reduce how they work and how many there are. They also don't add any new copy abilities to this game, instead just reusing the mechanics of some from Kirby's Adventure. What they do add, however, is 3 new animal buddies for Kirby, which add to Kirby's abilities, sort of like how they work in Donkey Kong Country. How could I not mention it? You got Rick the hamster, Coo the owl, and Kind the fish, which all help out with Kirby in different ways. You got my goat, my hamster, Rick the hamster, who travels faster on land, compensating for Kirby's relatively slow movement speed. Everyone needs to compensate. Trust me, I know. And then you got Coo the owl, who lets Kirby have better control while flying, and then Kind the fish, which allows Kirby to swim like a fish. I really like these animal friends, but not really for the abilities they give you. I just think they look cool, especially Rick the hamster. Hell yeah! This game is significantly longer than the previous Kirby game on Game Boy, being more similar lengthwise to Kirby's Adventure. Each stage takes much longer to complete than before, and they have much more collectibles hidden around to encourage exploration and replayability. The main collectibles in this game are the rainbow drops that you can find in certain levels, which get incredibly difficult to find near the end. For most of them, you need to use a certain Animal Friend's capabilities to get it, which works really well to encourage, changing up the gameplay. And also using Rick the Hamster, hell yeah! Collecting all of these is actually the only way to fully complete this game and get the real final boss. Like the previous games, you need to get to the end and kick the shit out of King Dedede, and once you've collected all 7 rainbow drops, then you get the true final boss against Dark Matter itself. That's right, Dark Matter, a form of matter we know very little about, nor if it even exists in the form we believe it to. It's gonna fight this pink ball fella. This is fine. Overall, this game is a huge upgrade from the first game. While the first game is incredibly easy to fly through and complete in like 20 to 30 minutes and never think about again, like I did with my ex-wife. Hey guys, was that really funny? I worked really hard on thinking about that joke. This game definitely feels like more of an actual game with a lot more depth. It expands on everything the first 2 games did, especially the first game, as this is like an actual sequel to number 2 and stuff. While I'm not sure if this is the most memorable game and if I'm going to remember it in like 20 minutes, I liked it. Like, do you think I'm going to have a long hardcore drinking night with my friends and wake up in a pile of my own vomit and say, hey, remember Kirby's Dream Land 2? Okay, well that was a trick question because I don't have any friends, but still. This game also looks very impressive, especially compared to the first one and compared to like any other Game Boy game. I mean, it's still on the Game Boy, so the term impressive more just means there's more depth than a Stickman, but it does look pretty good. I actually think that this is one of the only games on the original Game Boy that still truly holds up today, because while I like many Game Boy games, a lot of them just don't work anymore, like the original Mario Land or Link's Awakening. For how good those games are at their core, I do not want to play these. So I mean, if you really want to go and play a game on the original Game Boy, then I guess this is like one of the best you can pick up, but also, it's not the 90s anymore. You can get an iPhone or something, Are you okay? I'm one to talk. Alright, we have peaked. The rest of the Kirby games only come with 1 game and 1 package. But you know how many games come in this Kirby game that only has 1 package? 8 whole games. That means 8 times the fun and 8 times the amount of hatred flowing through my bones for this game. This game is described as an anthology action platformer game, which I have never heard to describe a game before. Now, I will be the first to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of anthologies. I have a hard time getting into them because they're just so short and kind of boring sometimes, and also the only anthologies I have experience with are Fantasia and the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes, so I should probably broaden my horizons. But I've never heard of an anthology video game before, so maybe my mind will be officially changed. Holy shit! This game, as stated before, is split into 8 different games in one, which basically means that this game includes 8 less in-depth games in one. The first minigame is Spring Breeze, which is a full-on enhanced remake of the very first Kirby game on the Game Boy. This adds things like copy abilities, better physics, and improved level design compared to the original, as well as just adding color to the game, which doesn't seem like it would be that big of an upgrade, but holy shit am I happy to see some color, and it's lively too. This game also feels buttery smooth compared to the first 3 Kirby games we've looked at. In no way did they control bad, they controlled more than fine, it's just so nice to have such a nice feel. To put it in perspective, think of the change in the feel between Super Mario Bros. 1 and Super Mario Bros. 3. Just ignore Mario 2 in this equation. Both of them. Honestly, just the improvements added here alone make me appreciate the game so much more, because now it doesn't feel like I'm going out of my way to play a game on the Game Boy, and more just going out of my way to play a game, if that makes any sense. You also get things like partners added in this version, which allows you to split off your copy abilities to have a different player follow you and fight enemies until it dies. The next minigame in this game is Dynablade, where this big-ass bird wants to take all the crops in Dreamland, so Kirby being his fat-ass self must defend the crops from the stupid bird. Basically, this is a fighting sort of game where you must be Kirby and have a partner and beat the shit out of the stupid-ass bird. This actually feels oddly similar to how Super Smash Bros. Feels to play, specifically like the bosses, which makes sense because the same developer developed both of these games, but I just thought it was neat. The next minigame here is Gourmet Race, which is a racing game. Basically, you, Kirby, need to race against King Dedede to see who can eat the most food, which works pretty much as you'd expect. Just find ways to go faster than King Dedede and reach more food, and do this for like 3 stages, and that's it. You can also race a ghost version of yourself, similar to the time trials in Mario Kart, where you can see your racer and race yourself. I have no idea what I'm supposed to say about this game. The next game is my favorite, being the Great Cave Offensive, which works as a Metroidvania type game. Just a side note here because I can't help myself, I always thought the name Metroidvania was a stupid name for pretty much an entire genre of games. Like, Metroid and Castlevania aren't the only open platforming games, let alone aren't even the best of the best, so why do we act like they are? I don't know, it just seems like we're holding some games back, but whatever. In here, you must explore through a big cave and solve puzzles and whatever to find the treasure, which is often a reference to a Nintendo game or something. Like, you can find the Triforce from Zelda or Samus's helmet from Metroid. Hey, we were just talking about that. The next minigame in this game is the Revenge of Meta Knight, where you need to fight Meta Knight and stop him from stopping Dreamland from being lazy. It seems a little counterintuitive, but hey, I respect why Kirby's trying to stop Meta Knight. Although considering that the entirety of Dreamland is lazy because that's like how their society works, it kinda makes me wonder what their economy is like. Like, I thought the gas prices were bad where I lived. Thank God I don't live in Dreamland. Damn, bitch! I'm moving to Fortnite! This kind of just works as a boss rush, as some smaller bits of platforming / gauntlets to go through. It's nothing mind-blowing, it's just a fun thing to mess around in. The next minigame here is Milky Way Wishes, which is by far the longest game to get through here. It's pretty much just a game itself here, not like the relatively short and simple games also included here. You have 9 worlds to go through the Milky Galaxy, where Kirby needs to stop Marx, this crazy jester dude, from probably doing something bad like stopping the Dreamland obesity crisis. It's just a basic Kirby platformer and doesn't really introduce anything super meaningful to the series, and more or less just works as, well, a fun game to play because why not? The next minigame here is the Arena, which just works as a boss rush but on steroids. And lastly, the next minigame here is a little fighter called Megaton Punch, along with a minigame sort of like a minigame in Kirby's Adventure called Kirby Samurai. Oh, sorry, I meant the next. Kirby Super Star is kind of just a game you can blast through in a few hours and skip some stuff if you don't really want to play it, or you don't care that much to play through a bunch of it. It's just a good Sunday night game where you've had the whole day to do nothing and don't have the drive to do anything productive since tomorrow's Monday and you get your stuff done then, so just turn this game on because you've run out of weed or something. I'm saying that it's a game you can shut your brain off to and have a lot of fun, like comfort food. I didn't need to say all that. This game is cool because over the last few years before this game, we'd received a few random Kirby spin-off games, so this one's like the ultimate Kirby spin-off game that I count as mainline, so then not a spin-off, but I'm just gonna save myself the headache here and go smoke. Some spin-offs we got around this time are Kirby's Pinball Land, because every kid in the 90s wanted to play pinball on their Game Boy with Kirby. Me, on the other hand, I always wanted to play pinball with The Sopranos, which is why I wished on a shooting star, and boom, there we go. We could have had world peace. Then we also got Kirby's Dream Course, which is kind of like golf, where you need to hit Kirby and get him into a hole at the end and dodge things around the stage, like these things that shoot deadly projectiles at you. Like golf. But my favorite is Kirby Tilt and Tumble, where I just noticed I wrote that as Kirby Tit and Tumble, which is something I'd love to see. I like this game because it's kind of the same thing as Kirby's Dream Course, just downgraded to work on the Game Boy Color. But you may notice that the cartridge has this growth on it, which looks different than any other Game Boy Color cartridge. That's because the game has a gyroscope built inside of it, which is such a cool way to get past the hardware restrictions of the Game Boy, because why the hell would this thing have a gyroscope built into it? Hell, neither did the Wii Remote originally, and that thing was all about movement. For that, you either had to buy this ugly lip injection thing to attach to your Wii Remote's glory hole, or just buy one of the new upgraded ones. The only issue with including a gyroscope in a Game Boy cartridge is that it's easily breakable, which makes this game annoyingly expensive like 20-some years later to buy. I don't know why I'm talking so much about this game. I know I'm only supposed to be talking about the mainline Kirby games, so I'll get back to that. I just think this game is really neat, so leave me alone. And here we go, the final entry in the trilogy of Kirby's Dream Land games. It's weird, I never think of the Kirby's Dream Land games as a trilogy of games, rather just 3 different games, probably because they're all incredibly different from each other, especially this one. This game takes a massive jump from the 2 previous games being on handheld consoles, and this one on a home console, being the Super Nintendo, which in comparison to the original Game Boy is like comparing a Greek god to a field mouse, hardware-wise. And this is actually one of the few older Kirby games I actually have experience with. I owned this game on the Wii U Virtual Console when I was younger, and even though I don't think I had the mental capacity to go very far into this game, I remember loving it and having a lot of fun. This game just has one of those fun and nice aesthetics that I always have been attracted to, and no, not in the weird way. It's the same reason why I love the original Yoshi's Island so much, and why I'm excited to take another look at this game when I'm not in a young child's brain, so I can hopefully find a bigger appreciation for this game that isn't just, oh, look at the bright colors. Like, I don't even think this game has any aging problems or junk like the first few Kirby games have. It's just fun. The gameplay is pretty much the same as the previous games, just with even more polish and fully expanded upon mechanics. Like, the copy abilities are back, and using more than 2 buttons on the Super Nintendo controller, you can do a lot more with them. And there's even more abilities, all pretty different from each other, which I love to see. And even my beloved animal buddies make a return here, along with Rick the Hamster, hell yeah, who might I add is looking better than ever. They all work the same as in Dreamland 2, just their movesets expanded upon like the copy abilities, and you even get a few new animal buddies along with the return of the old ones. You got Nago the Calico Cat, which is my favorite breed of cat, so you love to see it, who's able to jump 3 whole times and take out multiple enemies at a time with just 1 stomp. Then you got Pitch the Bird, who works kind of the same as Coo the Owl, just a little different. And lastly, Choo Choo the Octopus, who can float on water, climb on ceilings, and whatever an octopus can do. Awesome. With the new moves and new animal buddies given to you here, they make their inclusion feel that much more earned, and they're very creative with in-depth puzzles you can do with these guys, and what can I say, I just like having Ricky the Hamster with me. He makes me feel protected. Works better than a condom, too. This game practically perfects the Kirby gameplay we've seen for a while now, just everything feels right and tweaking what maybe didn't work as well before. And the levels here have fully evolved to just be plain fun. They're a good length, if not a little long sometimes, and I just like this game, can't you tell? Similar to Kirby's Dream Land 2, this game is a hidden boss after you fight King Dedede as long as you get all the collectibles, this boss being Zero, and also the return of Dark Matter. What I like about this boss specifically is that it's hip and edgy. I'm in my emo phase, can't you tell? Dark Matter and Zero are these godlike creatures that can destroy the entire world with a snap of a finger. It's not like King Dedede, who's just this fat-ass penguin with a big hammer. These guys are like real bad guys who could like kill people and stuff. And that's bad. But Kirby, being determined and obese, is able to stop these guys, and oh my god, is that fucking blood? Nintendo including blood in their family-friendly games? How could they? Except for that one time when they included a slur in Mario Party 8. I actually find the inclusion of these scary-ass bosses and blood to be a perfect fit for a series like Kirby. Hear me out. While most things you find in this game may be colorful, bubbly creatures, but for the end to just have these crazy demons from hell with blood coming out of their eyes is a funny-ass juxtaposition. I love it. Juxtaposition, big word, pay attention. I could gush about this game for hours, probably haven't tried, but I could talk about it for a while. Like, look at the sky here. I love it. Sky in real life? Boo! Sky in Kirby's Dream Land 3? Yeah! I just think it's awesome that this game was able to be so cool by switching to a much more powerful platform compared to the Game Boy, and for this game to be so amazing compared to the first 2 games and even Kirby's Adventure. But this was actually the final Nintendo published game for the Super Nintendo, coming out well into Nintendo 64's lifespan, which probably affected sales because what kid would want to play an old game like this when you got new games like Bubsy 3D? But after this, it was finally time for Kirby to switch axes, and go into 3D. Oh. In the great old year of 2000, just after everyone thought they were gonna die when the clock struck midnight, and just prior to them making airports fucking suck, we got a new Kirby game for Nintendo 64, being Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards. I've actually owned this game for a couple years now on the Wii U Virtual Console. I remember I had a kick where I bought a bunch of old Nintendo 64 games. I was worried they were going to be delisted forever when the eShop shut down. This was before Nintendo 64 came to Switch Online. Leave me alone. But I own this game, and I vividly remember always needing to play the game, but I genuinely do not think I ever booted the game up before. Until now, on my Switch. I always forget how shitty Nintendo 64 games look on the Wii U. Yeah, I have no idea how when I was little I got a 101% save file on my Nintendo 64. This game looks like shit on the Wii U. I want to tear my eyeballs out looking at it here. One thing I've always found kind of weird about this game is that it tries to do both the naming schemes seen on the Nintendo 64, having 64 in the title but also including a subtitle. A lot of the games has ended with 64 in the title, signifying what console they were made for, and I don't want to hear about how, wow, where's the other 63 games? I've heard the damn joke before! But some also just gave the name of the game a subtitle, which in my opinion is the more classy option, but who am I to judge? Although, if you were at the store, and which name grabs you more? Super Mario 64 or The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? I'm just saying. I guess they couldn't choose between Kirby 64 or Kirby the Crystal Shards, so just mix both the names together and... this is the inbred side of your family. Anyways, this was the very first game in the Kirby series to bring the game into the third dimension. Kind of. Unlike many of Nintendo's other popular series like Mario, Zelda, and Donkey Kong, they didn't literally make this a 3D game where you can move in just more than 2 directions. They instead opted to make this a 2D platformer with 3D graphics, which was a cool thing to see at the time, as there weren't very many games in this generation like this. Today, on the other hand, I am so sick and tired of seeing these. While being cool and standing apart from a lot of Nintendo's other games during this generation because of this, it also makes the game incredibly forgettable. Mario 64 is remembered for translating the Mario gameplay in many games seen prior into the 3rd dimension. Zelda Ocarina of Time is remembered for taking the old Zelda games and making it feel like more of an adventure because these places look real, if you have schizophrenia. But Kirby 64, it has the same gameplay as the old Kirby games, so nobody ever really talks about this game. And you may think this game would be the best out of all the 2D Kirby games, but I just don't think it is. Not even at all. It just feels janky at parts, but considering that it's on the Nintendo 64, I think it's impossible for a game to not feel janky to an extent when being played on this thing. Like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but this game just has a jank to it that I can't explain, but it just does. This game is obviously better than the first 2 Kirby's Dream Land games because they were on the fucking Game Boy, but this thing does not hold a candle whatsoever to the platforming scene in Kirby Super Star and especially Kirby's Dream Land 3. And I'm not even saying this game is bad at all, because it's not. It's quite fun and a sweet little game to play through, but I just find this game to not be very memorable and just kind of basic. I really like how the game looks. It gives me those weird late 90s computer screensaver vibes, which are some of my favorite, and it's very colorful, but yet again, I just think the previous games looked nicer. But I will say, this is a good game. It's a fun game, the levels are well designed, and everything works. It's just brought down by that it could have been a really cool evolution of the Kirby gameplay and series as a whole. As after this, the mainline Kirby games instead moved to handheld consoles like the Game Boy Advance, and the original developers HAL Laboratory took more of a backseat until they left the series altogether. I don't mean to end this on kind of a sour note by being so negative about Kirby 64, because don't get me wrong, I like this game, it just feels a little empty, you know? But playing all these old games has given me an appreciation for the Kirby series I hadn't really had before. As I explained at the beginning, I had always liked the series, but I hadn't played enough of the games to call myself a real fan, but now after playing all these old games, plus whatever I had played before like Forgotten Land and some 3DS stuff, I can call myself more of a fan. And that makes me very excited to visit many of the more modern games I skipped out on, because that's what I'll be doing later. I think I'm contractually obligated to mix in some Sonic games between everything else I do.
Oh, there's my desk! I forgot I gave it a bath the other day.